Become a sustaining member of the Commonwealth Club for just $10 a month. Join today.
Hello, and welcome to today's virtual Commonwealth Club program. My name is Dan Ashley, the evening anchor at ABC 7 News, and a longtime member of the Commonwealth Club Board of Directors, and delighted to be your moderator today. We are so glad you could be with us. This program is part of the Travers Family Foundation Ethics and Accountability Series with additional support from the Bernard Osher Foundation. As the club continues to host these great virtual events, we're certainly grateful for the continued support of our members and our donors. Thank you very much for that. Visit commonwealthclub.org to learn more about membership or support the club right now with a tax-deductible gift, clicking the blue donate button on your screen. It is that easy to continue to support the Commonwealth Club, and we are so deeply grateful because we believe so much in what the Commonwealth Club is all about. As we continue our conversation today, we want you to be a part of it. So you can submit your questions in the chat function on Zoom, and I'll see them, and I will ask the questions to our wonderful guest today. And it is my pleasure to introduce Cindy McCain, author of Stronger: Courage, Hope, and Humor in My Life with John McCain. You know, Mrs. McCain has dedicated her life to improving the lives of those less fortunate, both in the United States and around the world, particularly in Africa. She is chair of the Board of Trustees of the McCain Institute for International Leadership at Arizona State University, and also chairs the Institute's Human Trafficking Advisory Council. Mrs. McCain is also well known for her advocacy and support of military families. Of course, her late husband, a celebrated veteran. She was married to Senator John McCain for 38 years, and her new book, Stronger, is a personal reflection of their incredible journey together, and it's a terrific read. I just finished it last night, as a matter of fact. Mrs. McCain, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're joining us from Phoenix, where you spend so much of your time in Arizona. It's a very important place for you and your family.
Well, and I'm so happy to say that it has not reached 100 degrees here yet. We're close, but it's not 100 degrees yet.
Emphasize yet.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, I would also like to thank the Commonwealth Club. I had several opportunities to join my husband when he spoke to the Commonwealth Club, and it was always a great experience. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Well, we're just delighted to have you with us. And let me start by offering a belated condolence for the loss of your husband for all of us. He was certainly a great American.
He was something else. You joke about saying they broke the mold, but that's definitely the case in with him. He was someone that, lived by the code of conduct. He truly was mired in the fact that he didn't appreciate people that did not respect our country. He didn't like, he really believed that service to the country was something that was so noble and a cause, greater than your own self-interest, as you've heard him say.
Well, and we'll talk a great deal about his legacy in the next hour. Yeah. But you mentioned you learned a lot from him. You write quite extensively in the book on a number of occasions about lessons that you did learn from your late husband, Senator John McCain. I'm curious, Mrs. McCain, what have you learned since his death about yourself?
Well, one thing I did learn about myself is that I could survive. I could survive a life without John McCain. I wasn't sure in the beginning because he was such a force of nature that to all of a sudden not have the anchor in our family not here. And I know many people know how this feels, when to lose a loved one. But I wasn't sure. I was rudderless. I didn't have. I knew I had plenty of things to do, which I did go back to, but it was hard. It was a new normal, and my new normal didn't have, my mate and my playmate and my friend involved in it.
One of the things that I found so touching repeatedly throughout the book was how much of a role, and I recognized, or I identified with it too, because it's important to me. That humor played such an important role in your relationship together. And, we often saw John McCain on television as a very serious, sober guy talking about very important national issues. But he was a lot of fun too, wasn't he?
Oh, he was so much fun. I have been asked often lately about what I miss the most, and I think I miss the humor the most because he always had, when things are really, really bad, really tough, or we lost the 2008 race, all the things that occurred during our life, he could always level it out with humor. And it was always at the perfect timing, the perfect, and it was such a nice thing because you never want to take yourself too seriously, and that was something he always reminded me of. And so I miss the humor, and I miss the enjoyment that he got from life. Are the things I really miss right
He
now.
did seem to embrace life fully,
He
as
did.
did you. And
Yeah.
but he also he could have a silly sense of humor. He had a silly side, didn't he? A very
Oh, yeah.
playful side.
Yeah, he did. He did. He was just a fun guy. He was the kind of guy I'd have people say to me, "Gee, he's the kind of guy you want to go have a beer with because he was so much fun." And that's the truth. I mean, he loved to talk sports. He liked to be. In fact, we all were sure that if he had retired from the Senate, he would have become a sportscaster. So,
Oh, that's great. Well, I want to ask you about. There are a million questions I have for you, but I want to start just with the book and the idea of writing this book and calling it Stronger. Why did you title it Stronger?
well, the title was and is important to me. Like a lot of women, I married my husband very young, and I was very shy and very naive and very, I was from Phoenix, Arizona, and although I'd gone to college in California, I was an only child and had a pretty sheltered existence. So when I arrived in Washington with my husband, I realized that I met my match and what I could endure and could really understand. It took me years to really begin to understand the workings of Washington and also understand how to move around in it.
A little bit. It's a
It's an
growing
intimidating
experience.
place.
It's very intimidating, yeah. It's especially during the job John was doing. To be an elected member because there's an order in Washington D.C. and it starts with the elected members.
It must have been a whirlwind to go to Washington as a young, newlywed bride
Hmm.
in the center of power in Washington, and
Mhm.
and all of the good things that encompass that, but also all of the negative things. Washington's a very tough,
Yeah.
backbiting town, and to find yourself in the middle of that firestorm must have been very, very challenging.
Well, it was challenging for this reason. Like I said, I was very young, very naive. I was very shy, and Washington is anything but that. And so, for me, the what I realized early on is that I could either fold from this or I could get my act together and figure out how to do this. And so I began this kind of this quest and this learning experience about not only how to navigate Washington, but how to do good things in Washington and how to be a good person in Washington, which sometimes doesn't always work. And let's be very clear. John used to remind me there's no heavy lifting in this job. So we had a glorious life. It was I had a front row seat to history with my husband, and even though there were some dark times and some times perhaps I didn't understand, it was also an incredible ride with him.
Well, you got to see the country, meet people from all walks of life. You got to
Yeah.
see the world and meet powerful and important people.
Mhm.
What a great privilege.
Oh, an absolute privilege. And the older I became, I know I obviously realized it. I realized it early on, but the older I became, I realized really what an adventure this is, and what an opportunity that I've had as a woman, number one, and someone who happened to have access to a man who was one of the most powerful people in Washington, if not the country.
What did you learn in those early months and years in Washington about finding your place,
Yeah.
and what advice would you give other women and men for that matter about finding your place when confronted with uncomfortable environments?
For me, it was, and I'll use the example that was in the book, the experience I had with Nancy Reagan. She was whatever, for whatever reason, and she knew my husband's ex-wife really well, so I don't fault her for any of this by any stretch. But so she was on another team, and so she made it very uncomfortable for me throughout the years. It wasn't just one experience, but it was the entire time she was alive. And so I learned from that. I learned forgiveness. I learned as my mother said, always be nice, always be kind. You will be glad you did in the end. And I was. And so I had to learn kindness and respect and dignity after being made sure that I was told I didn't have any of those. So,
Well, it's interesting that you say that this went on for a period of time with former First Lady Nancy Reagan, not just
And
the dinner.
let me say
also, I respect her as First Lady, and I respected President Reagan. I don't harbor any ill will. I'm just kind of defining what occurred to me.
Yeah. No, and understood, and a fair point. And you make that very clear in the book that you have great respect for her.
I do.
And didn't take it personally, but it wasn't just
I
the
did in the
dinner
beginning. Let's be clear, in the beginning, I really did take it a little personal.
Well, that's fair. You describe in the book that one dinner where she sort of makes a snarky comment toward you and cuts you off. But I guess that was emblematic of how difficult an environment that could be.
Yeah, it was. I'd never been around anything like that. I mean, out in Arizona, everyone's friendly, and I lived in an environment where everyone was friends and we had good times, and my family, all those kinds of things. So this was a new experience for me. And John really had to tell me, he's the one that really put me straight on really how to handle some of this and how to just take it in stride. I mean, that's the hardest thing of all, is just to sit there and take it and then realize it's their problem, not yours.
Well, one of the lessons that you describe, and something that seemingly was something that Senator McCain was very mindful of, is to control your anger and respond deliberately and not let things get under your skin. Not easy to do, though knives are out in Washington, but just in life, he seemed to be able to, and you seem to learn to sort of model that behavior, to not take it too personally and not be angry and not hold grudges.
Right. Exactly. And that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, was for that reason, because if left to my own terms and not having really been around John very much, I probably would have held some grudges. but he reminded me life's too short to hold grudges and be angry. And what life should be joyful and happy and inspiring. And that was really the lesson I took from him.
Which is one of the inspiring aspects of his story, is having been held captive for 5 years, had the opportunity to be released and chose not to. And he was brutally beaten and tortured and subjected to terrible treatment. And yet, as you write in the book, he came through that relatively unscathed in terms of emotional scars and still retained an optimistic outlook. You must have, I think the country marveled at that.
Yeah, it was, he was a truly amazing man. And the large part of the reason he came through this, remember, there were two different kinds of people serving. There were the people that had gone to school like John did, to the Naval Academy, and he was a professional soldier. That was who John was. But we had so many men serving that were not, they were drafted. So John's advantage was that he was a professional soldier, number one, and his use of humor. I mean, some of the funniest stories I've ever heard were when they were in prison together. The guys were at one point living in one room together. And the stories he regaled me from, and everyone else from that, were really hysterical. It was his way. I think it was his way of coping also, but it was also a great lesson for him, because, he could have come back very angry, and he could have come back very defeated, and he didn't. And that was never more evident than when he and John Kerry were at the signing with President Clinton of the normalization of relations between U.S. and Vietnam.
To me, that was the act of forgiveness I never thought I would ever witness. And
what did he say about that?
It was important to move on. It was important to move on to him. And he felt that the only way to do it was to help lead the way on that. And it was time. It was over. It was time to move on. And that's really genuinely how he felt.
Well, I don't want to dwell on this, but for just one moment, but I would be remiss, Mrs. McCain, if I didn't ask on the subject of holding grudges. President Trump and your husband, your late husband, there was no love lost between them, and President Trump was often very nasty toward him publicly. Do you have any understanding of why that was the case? You write in the book that he was jealous, and I'm not surprised to hear that at all. He probably was jealous of the type of man that John McCain was with his service record to the country. But what do you make of that?
Well, I really found it really odd. I mean, I couldn't understand how, no matter whether you liked John personally or not, how you could look at not just John, but all the other men that served that were POWs together with John and somehow denigrate their service because they were shot down. That never made any sense to me. And John, it never made any sense to John. But as always, John didn't feel bad for himself. He felt badly for the other men, that held the same medals and things that he did for being shot down and being captured. I don't understand any of it. Again, I had to learn from John, from his deathbed, how to deal with this. And I did. I mean, he taught me many things, how to live. And then he also taught me how to die with dignity. And that's exactly what happened. And that was part of it.
Let's talk quickly about the lesson of dying with dignity. What did you learn from your husband? I know when he was diagnosed, he really was the epitome of the stiff upper lip, at least publicly. But that entire process, he retained, it sounded like, a sense of optimism, even when he knew it was not going to go well.
Yeah.
He tried to protect you and everyone else.
He did. He was a kind of man that, of course, protected his family, me and the children, and his other children as well. And so when it came time to really face the fact that this was not going to have a good outcome, we really took our cues from him. And he was, as you know, I'll use the word stoic, although that's not really what it was. It was, he was brave. He was dignified. He knew he'd had a great life. He knew he'd lived a great life and wanted to celebrate that and not have people feel bad for him and mourn him. And that's really what occurred. It was, like everything, obviously it was a horrible thing, but it all of us together realized, that he had really had guided us through all this whole thing without us really knowing he was guiding us.
You mentioned in the book that interview, and I remember watching that interview when the senator said that as he looked back on his life dealing with this diagnosis, that he is grateful and filled with gratitude. And it sounds like you have come to that place as well, just filled with gratitude. But he did seem to look back joyfully at his life and not and handle it with great dignity and not mourn what was being lost, but celebrate what he had had.
That's exactly, you described it perfectly. He really celebrated his life. And so all throughout the process of, the 14 months that he was struggling with this and then ultimately passed, we had a party one weekend. He was very ill at that point, but he really wanted to bring his friends together, see everyone, and have a good time. And so he insisted on a party. And so we had a costume party. I mean, I know some of these things are not very well known, but I mean, we had a Roaring '20s party, and that's exactly what he wanted. And then one time we snuck him off to Vegas. I mean, he was wheelchair bound, but he loved going to Vegas, and so we took him. I got him up there and kept it secret and kept it just between us. But that was what he wanted to do. He wanted to celebrate and he wanted to be happy. And that's what we tried to do for him.
And have fun. Did he want to go play the slot machines or something in Las Vegas one last
No,
time?
he plays craps. Are you kidding?
Oh, does he really? Did he win on that trip or not?
He did win.
Actually, I have kind of a funny story because he won. He had some good luck at the table. And our younger son, when my husband passed, asked if he could have my husband's briefcase. And I said, of course you may. And he got it home and he called me up. He goes, Mom, Dad's winnings are in the briefcase. I didn't know they were in there. So he scored some money, I guess, from the briefcase.
Well, let's talk a little bit now, and there's so much I want to talk about what you've accomplished on your own as well, and I want to move into that. You describe a lot of it in the book, but I want to just dwell a little bit more on John McCain's public life and your role in that, and the decision to run for president. Describe that conversation and how you felt about it.
Well, the first time, he ran twice. So the first time he came to me with this, to me, it was like a new adventure. It was, oh, we're going to do this. We knew we were a long shot. We knew we probably wouldn't win, but the race was great. And so the conversation was an easy one. The second race was a different deal because I knew what we were getting into, and I was still bruised from what had occurred to Bridget. And so he took me to the Maldives, as I write about in the book, and we had a lovely week. We spent a week in the Maldives, and then one night, I had a drink in my hand. We were on a sandy beach, and he said, I really want to run for president. And even though I thought I had dug my heels in and was going to say no, I realized that who was I to say no to a man who aspired to the highest office in the land and could possibly win it. So I had to really, really step back and then, of course, support him 100%, which I did.
It was a different time the second time around because he had a real shot that time, obviously.
Yeah.
And everyone knew it, even in the primaries.
Well, and social media was just in its infancy, but it was having an effect. I mean, it was a much different kind of race the second time. Not bad in any way, but just a different kind of race.
Yeah, probably more intense in a lot of ways. Because
much more so, yeah.
Did you enjoy that process? It's exhausting. It's stressful. Your barbs are being thrown at you constantly. Did you still enjoy the process, and did the senator?
Yeah, we both did very much. You walk away from it because it's called being in the bubble, and you're in the bubble so long that you make great friends, and some of them are journalists that you become friends with. But I mean, and those people are some of our dearest friends now. The kinds of experiences you have together, especially when you're trying to do something that could be so meaningful for the country, and to be able to watch people respond to John and watch them, even if they disagreed with him, still respond to him in a positive way. It was really fun to watch, and to me, it was very heartwarming just to see it.
Let's talk about the decision to select Sarah Palin as running mate. It was praised and also criticized in equal measure, maybe more the latter. Was that a good decision in retrospect or a mistake?
It was the decision, and John was one that never looked back. Hindsight, he didn't believe in hindsight being 2020. And it was, I write about it in the book. We both had looked very long and hard at Lieberman, Senator Lieberman, I'm sorry. And it would have been a great opportunity to have run a bipartisan ticket, a Republican candidate and a Democratic vice presidential candidate. But the truth of it was we couldn't get it through the convention. And so we had to look at other alternatives. And I think John wanted to bounce outside the box a bit. That was the kind of guy he was. And so we took a chance on her.
And with history knows what happened with the race as a result. And there were high moments, there were low moments. It's interesting to read in your book that Sarah Palin did not reach out to Senator McCain in the time that he was ill and did not come to his funeral. It was not invited. Tell me about that. Were you surprised that she never reached out when he was sick?
I was. Look, it didn't matter to me one way or another who reached out. I wanted my husband happy. I wanted him to know that he had been loved and that people respected him. And so there were some within our core group of people that I thought, well, sure, they'll be here. Of course they're going to come, because it was my job to organize all of that, and it was my job to make sure everyone was comforted, had food, all those kinds of things. And so I was just surprised, really, is what I was. My husband, as always, never dwelled on that and never said an angry word at all.
Truly, he didn't.
No.
It's so interesting. I won't ask you who surprised you by not coming, because you wrote about Sarah Palin. That's why I asked it. Who surprised you by showing great sympathy and concern for your husband? Were there any surprise visits or calls that you didn't really expect to hear from?
Oh yeah. One in particular was Rahm Emanuel and his wife. I mean, we were friends. We were friends with them in the beginning after President Obama was elected. But Rahm Emanuel and his wife came. I mean, Mitch McConnell came. Of course, Joe Biden came. And heads of state came. I mean, I tried not to exhaust my husband, so I would do 3 days a week where we would have people, and then the other 4 were waiting for him to rest and recuperate from it. The outpouring was simply amazing. It was just simply amazing. And lots of surprises, lots of, the Romneys came, obviously a lot of senators came, a lot of House members came. It was a very nice tribute to him.
And did they, forgive me, were they coming to the ranch in Arizona?
Yeah.
That's quite a trip. That's not easy.
Yeah, it is quite a trip. Yeah, it is.
Telling.
People came from overseas to see him.
It was such a tribute to who he was as a man and as a leader, that to see these people really want to, pay their tribute to him. And he was, he wound up comforting them, quite frankly. It was kind of what it was all about. And, but it was, I'm so grateful for everything.
Did President Trump call? I know he didn't come visit at the Rotunda. Did he call at all?
He called, John wound up in Walter Reed at one point in Washington, and he called that night. He called me that night. So I did speak with him. But that was way early. This was, I guess maybe December of the year prior. John died in August of 2018, so it was December of 17.
What was that conversation like?
He was just calling to see how he was and how I was. It was Spartan, but it was fine. I mean, he was not angry or rude or anything. So no.
And you appreciated the call?
Of course I did. It was the President of the United States. Of course I did.
Let me turn attention now to some of the things that I find so fascinating about you. And what was really interesting, Mrs. McCain, about this book is, and I really enjoyed it because there were several surprises, and every handful of pages, there was something I learned that I did not know about you or about the senator. It was very interesting. And one of which was, and I think a lot of people will relate to this, you were afraid of flying. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you were deathly afraid of flying, but you did not like flying.
I was definitely afraid of flying. I was really scared.
Tell everyone how you conquered that fear and what happened as a result.
Well, when John told me he was going to run for the Senate, I knew, because of Arizona is a very rural state and we'd have to fly around the state to get any work done, for sure. So I knew we were going to be in small airplanes. So I decided, I didn't tell my husband. I went to take ground school lessons, and I thought, well, at least I'll know what's going on. I'll know how to read the instruments and all that. And as it turned out, I loved it. And I wound up getting a pilot's license, getting an airplane, and then I flew him. I was his pilot during the 86 campaign. So
literally flew him around.
I literally flew him around. I did.
He's obviously was a military pilot. How was he? He must have been so incredibly proud. Was he a nervous passenger?
No, he wasn't a nervous passenger at all. He sat in the back and read. I mean, he left it to me and whoever else was in the plane, his staff or whatever. But I mean, it was really fun. And he was really happy for me. He was very proud of me.
Which I really loved.
Well, and that's a life lesson, isn't it? I mean, that's a lot of people can take away from your experience that you took something on that was intimidating and challenging and decided to make it something that you embraced. That's a great life lesson.
It is. It is.
And I think, for me, stepping outside the box or going outside my limits, I always do. I like doing it because it is a challenge, and it's a challenge to me, but it's hard too. You step out, you're not in your comfort zone when you do it.
Well, so much. My youngest son, who's 28 today, as a matter of fact, is a pilot and training to be a commercial pilot. And I'm not a big small plane person either myself, to be honest. I've done it many times. I'm not crazy about it, but he keeps telling me you should learn to fly and you'll get over that.
Yeah. I agree with them on that. The staff used to joke with John, we'd be flying from wherever it was. One particular trip was to Boston, and it was a very bumpy trip. Again, a small plane. This is during the presidential run. And John's sitting there reading, and I look over at Mark Salter. I'll tell the story on him. And he had pictures of his kids sitting on his knees because he was so scared. And so we began the joke that ran around all of the offices and all of the people is that, because John would say, I'm not going to die in a plane crash. I crashed too many. And he said, but we said, no, it'll crash. John McCain lives. Others die. It would be exactly what would occur. We wouldn't even be mentioned in it.
If anyone were to walk out, it would have been him.
Yeah, walk away completely from
anyone was to walk. Interesting. Well, so you began this process of sort of personal growth as a result of being thrown into this whirlwind of a life. You learned to fly an airplane. You learned to function in Washington. You became, for someone who was very shy from Arizona, you learned to become a public speaker. And I presume to the point where you're very comfortable doing it now and don't think too much about it when you do it.
Yeah.
What were some of I know there were many, many highlights with you and the senator, but for you personally, what were some of the most salient moments as a politician's wife, but also as a very prominent American?
Well, I think one of the most for me was my speech at the Republican National Convention. Once again, I stepped outside my comfort zone. I didn't use a podium, and I walked and talked a lot like Elizabeth Dole had done in San Diego. And because I wanted to be around the people and I wanted to be close to them when I did it. And it took me some time to get that down. But when I finished it and completed it and realized what an impact it had, it was like, this is why you do this job, is to reach people. And so I had an opportunity because of my husband to be able to do this. And that evening was very special to me. It was very special.
Well, that must have been nerve-wracking before you went out.
Oh, God, yeah. yeah.
There's an old line which is supposedly true that more people are afraid of public speaking than they are of being in a plane crash.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Not anymore, but it was hard for me to really do it. And I think also understanding that what an opportunity to be able to speak, that people would want to, first of all, hear you speak and want to speak to you about issues that are important to you. And for me, it's been many things, as you know, human trafficking among many of them. But so it just was such an honor to be able to be a part of that.
Well, and I want to talk about some of these causes that are important to you. I'm sort of saving that as we go along here. But before you walked out and gave that speech, and I remember watching it very closely, what was your objective? What were you hoping to accomplish?
I wanted the American people to see me other than how the press had described me. They described me as aloof. They described me as, as uncaring, all the things. And really all of that was all chalked up to being really shy. and so I wanted them to see me in a different light. And hopefully when they are looking at candidates to choose, because you look at the wife too, or the spouse too, that they would think that I could do a good job as First Lady, that I would represent them well. And that was really what I wanted to do. And I wanted to do it for my children. My kids were, just everything about that. My son had gotten home from Iraq prior to it. I mean, there was a lot of emotions going on that week. And so it was a good time.
When you, let's go from the good time to, I don't want to say a bad time, but a difficult time when you lost the election. And I know there was a lot of, you write in the book about some self-doubt you had. Had you done everything that you could? Had you done the best? Yeah. When you lost the election, what was the senator's reaction? How did you both as a couple take that news?
We knew some days ahead that we probably weren't going to make it just because the bottom had fallen out of the economy. All the history that took place. So we had some idea that was going to happen. But the reality of it was we had to tell our kids because we had not shared that with them. And so we had to pull them all aside at once and explain to them what was going on and what we were going to do that night, which was John was going to give this eloquent speech. And that was hard because, you know, they'd put everything into it too. Even though my two sons couldn't campaign because they were in the military, they were still very much a part of it. It's their father. So that was the hard part in that. But John and I both, we knew, you know, you've got a 50-50 chance when you start when you do something like that. So we knew. And I guess I describe it in the book, but, you know, we came home and couldn't find the car keys and couldn't find the house keys because we'd been driven around for 2 years.
Well, what's so interesting about that is you're going 100 miles an hour and then all of a sudden it stops.
Bam, bam, dead still. You're exactly right. 2 hours prior to going down for the speech, we had a 100-car motorcade, and going home, there was just us tootling in the car.
Back to reality, right?
Back to reality. That's right.
Mrs. McCain, we have a question from a member of the audience. And again, anyone watching here, please use the chat feature on Zoom if you'd like to ask Mrs. McCain a question. From our audience, what 3 adjectives would you use to describe Senator McCain?
Oh, joyous, deliberate, and caring.
Interesting. Okay, excellent. Thank you for that question. Another question from our audience. You and your husband were married for 38 years. Is there any marriage advice that you can share with all of us?
Patience. Patience.
You know, like our marriage was no different than anyone else. We just did it in front of the world. You have to be patient. You have to be kind and understanding. You know, we learned the same lessons that everybody else did that have a long marriage. And but boy, I'd do it over in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
If I had a second chance.
Even under so much pressure, often professional pressure, you both seem to cling to one another and depend on one another and not let that pressure divide you. At least that's the impression that we get. Is that right? Right.
Yeah, we were very much partners in this, and it was you have to be. I mean, because many times the only truth you're going to get that day, and I don't mean people were lying to my husband. Please don't misunderstand me. But sometimes, you did a great job. But, you know, when he and I both knew we didn't do a good job, and so it was time to those kinds of things. It was it was we were very strong partners in this, and he ran everything by me. During both races and all the races, actually, all the Senate races and the House races too. And consequently, I did the same thing, you know, in trying to figure out a path for everybody and what was going on. It's one thing to run for president, if I can say this, the way we did. It's very public, everyone knows. And it's another thing to do it with a child in combat. And that was a double whammy for me, because my son was in combat in Iraq, and we couldn't say a word about him. You know, we would have endangered him. And so the added stress for me and for John too, during that time was very intense. It was very intense.
That brings up an interesting point, because with your son in combat, your late husband, Senator John McCain, of course, a combat veteran, kept prisoner for 5 years. He understood the risks in a very real way that your son was undertaking. It's different for a mother. And how did the two of you, how was Senator McCain with your son in combat? Did he worry to the same level you did, or understanding what was going on, it was a different experience for him?
John always did share things with me, but during the time that Jimmy was in Iraq, he didn't talk much about it. Any information I wanted, I went to Lindsey Graham to get, because, you know, I was reading things and listening to the news. And of course, was it close to where he's at? Do we know what's going on? And Lindsey always told me what was going on, but John couldn't do that. He just, he dealt with it in his own way. I mean, he certainly talked about him, but you know, John just dealt with it in a different way.
Was he worried sick as you were, or different because his experience is better?
Well, I'm sure he was worried sick, but he never exhibited it at all. I mean, I exhibited it. I mean, everyone that would listen to me, I tell. So.
Understandably, we can all relate to that. Yeah. As you know, Mrs. McCain, this program is part of the Travers Family Foundation's Ethics and Accountability series, with additional support from the Bernard Osher Foundation. Ethics and accountability, certainly two words that can be used to describe your late husband. Let's we have a couple of questions from our Travers Fellows.
Sure.
And let's begin with the first question, and I'll have you respond after we hear what this young person has to say.
Sure.
Hi, Mrs. McCain. My name is Katrina Bullock, and I am a third year at UC Berkeley studying political science. My question for you is, how do you think future leaders of America can work together to relieve bipartisan tension?
That's a really good question. I'm glad she asked that. First of all, I love the fact that you go to Berkeley, but I went to USC, so we are rivals in all this. It's up to all of us that are my age and your age and others to leave the world a better place for those who are behind us, who come in behind us. Unfortunately, I don't know that we've done that great a job this time. So it's up to these young people to take the helm and work together, practice the things that we have talked about within the generation, but haven't done a very good job at. And work civilly with others, find civil discourse, find the ability to perhaps agree to disagree. But if we continue this screaming match that's going on around the world, and I know everyone's familiar with it, we're never going to get anywhere. And I have great faith in young people like the recent question, because I believe that they've had enough. I think they've seen what's happened with all of this going on, and they have had enough, and they're going to take charge now. And I think that's a wonderful thing. It's really wonderful.
I think we see so much more activism among young people lately, and whether it's the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, now a lot of people rallying around what's been happening to Asian Americans in the country. But there was a period of time where there was so much, I felt, cynicism from young people about politics. That many wanted to check out. I think a lot of people wanted to check out of all ages, but there is, it seems, a renewed sense of commitment by young people who, after all, will drive our futures, to be involved, to be committed to causes, and to make a difference. I know that must make you happy and would certainly make the senator very happy.
Oh, yeah.
Our next generation leaders are very important. And no matter what field you may be in, the truth is we need you. And we need people to be active, and maybe not in politics, but in areas that I do, nonprofit work and other things like that. It's all very important. And I'm grateful that these young people are now pretty much standing up and saying, okay, enough now. It's our turn, and we're going to do a better job at it. And I've watched the same activism that you have with the Black Lives movement and all the other things that happened. And Phoenix was very, very tragically affected by a lot of this. And it's, to me, that had never occurred in Phoenix before, to see activism to that degree. And even though there was some damage and things that occurred, it was wonderful that people were active and out there doing it. And it was hot in those days. It was in the middle of the summer here. And I was grateful for it.
It's a great point, because while so many difficult things have happened the last year during the pandemic, and the silver lining is that they've gotten people out in the streets, peacefully in the streets, those people demonstrating, and gotten people involved and really raised a lot of awareness and a lot of aspirational ideas among young people. And that's a very good thing.
It's a marvelous thing, because for those of us who have tried our best and we hope we made a little bit of a difference, then comes this generation that are truly engaged, and they truly want to be a part of making this country a better place. And it really warms my heart. And my children are included in that. All four of mine are very, very active in their various areas and what they do together.
Well, let's listen to the second question now from our Travers Fellow.
Good afternoon, Mrs. McCain. My name is Thara Madhav, and I'm a senior at UC Berkeley majoring in political science and history. Your activism around equitable access to health care comes from your personal experiences. How can young people identify and advocate for issues that are important to them? Thank you so much.
Good question.
What I tell people that come to me and say, I want to get involved, how do I do it? Well, the first thing I say to them is, first of all, you have to do it from your heart. Whatever moves you, it has to touch your heart, because that drives you to be a part of whatever issue it may be, whatever it may be. You have to be excited about it. You can't do it just to do it. And so I tell people, find something. It doesn't matter what it is. You don't have to go, to the bizarre places I wind up in or anything like that. Your own community needs you. So I remind everyone, first of all, it has to come from your heart. And that's a lesson that Mother Teresa told me years ago, was to do it with your heart. And so, and also realizing that if you do it, then people are going to follow. People are going to follow you into it or follow you through it or whatever it may be, to help make change. And that's exciting. It's really exciting, but you can't do it because whatever issue it is, you can't do it because it may be the issue of the day, the fad. You know what I'm saying? You have to do it because you really believe it. And that's the most important part.
That's an excellent takeaway. It has to be sincere. It has to be authentic. Well, I want to turn to some of your activism before we wrap up. But prior to that, I want to talk about something else you talk about in the book that I think can be helpful to a lot of people. As you well know, we have an opioid crisis in this country, and it's devastating communities and families all over America. It's only been getting worse. That's something you know about firsthand. Please tell us a little bit about that, and then your thoughts on what we need to do.
Well, when this all began for me, I had the attitude that, oh, this will never bother me. That only happens in other neighborhoods or other places. And as a result, opioid addiction is in every family, whether you want to believe it or not. It's there. Addiction of some kind is there. And the miraculous thing that has occurred, even though we have a serious issue, is that people are beginning to recognize it's a disease. It's not an affliction. When I came forward with this years ago, the media and the people, the general public thought, well, oh my God, she's crazy. Who does that? And they shamed me for it. And I was sick. I was really sick. So now we have a media and a general public that are much more understanding of the fact that it is a disease, and shame plays no part in this. It should never be a part of anyone in the way that they deal with someone who has an addiction problem. And there are ways to get help. I tell every audience I talk to, there are ways to get help. Call me. I will get help for you, whatever the issue may be. But we're there for you. Those of us who walk the walk, we're there for you.
Were you surprised at at the power it had over you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, addiction is a very cunning enemy. This is something that I was full-blown addicted, and my husband never knew because I was so good at hiding it from him. And so it's things like that. I mean, it overwhelmed my life. And it was my parents, as I describe in the book, my parents came to me and said they didn't know what it was, but they said, there's something wrong with you. Whatever it is, let us help you. And that was the best thing they could have done. I went cold turkey that night.
And the lesson is there's help and there's a way out.
Right. And there's no reason, even though shame is the first thing you feel with something like this, don't feel shame, because shame will only take you down. Feel empowered, and now it's time to get help and walk the walk, take that first step. And it's hard to do, but there's plenty of us out there that will walk that step with you.
It's even harder on someone who's living a public life.
Yeah.
That's a challenge that most people don't have.
Yeah. No, it was the cartoons, things that I shouldn't have looked at, but I did. The cartoons that were drawn about me in the articles and stuff. It's a good lesson, and I like to preach to the media a little bit when I talk about this, because they were very much a part of it. They were the one drilling, making it, ginning the whole thing up, I should say. So yeah, but it's something in this country we have medical care that can help you with addiction and can lead you into a better life. And so I know healthcare is a whole different topic, but it's there, helps there.
We're almost out of time. I want to ask a couple more questions, Mrs. McCain, and give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about human trafficking and other causes that are important to you. How are you spending your time now in public service?
Yeah, I am full blown. I didn't really take any time off, which is why this book was rather cathartic for me to write, because I started writing it during the pandemic. But just post my husband dying, I went straight back to work. And so grieving did not occur until much later on. And so the process was interesting for me, and it was good for me. It was good for me to slow down and take a look at it. But what I'm doing is I'm working very hard in the human trafficking arena. We have a lot of projects that are working not just here in the United States, but overseas. This is a scourge, and this is, we hear about guns, we hear about drugs, we hear about art, precious art, but we don't hear that much about human trafficking, the human toll that this is taking. And so I view my job as not only bringing awareness to the world stage, but also to making sure that people hear me. This is not a woman's issue, believe me. So that's where I believe that I can be best helpful with this.
Well, you're to be commended for continuing to raise awareness for that
Thank
very
you.
important issue that affects families and communities all over this country
Thank you.
in ways we don't know. It's a very insidious problem,
Yeah.
Last question I want to ask, and give you the opportunity to describe the message, the overriding message that you want people to take from this book. It's called Stronger for a reason. What do you hope men and women who read this book will walk away with?
Well, I think one thing I'd like to remind women out there who are perhaps right now overwhelmed, they've got maybe 4 kids at home and they're tired, and plus they have to work, and of course the pandemic has tripled that, is that you are strong. And I had to discover that within myself. I didn't know I was strong, but I discovered it, and I started to use it for good. And so I like to remind people that being that finding that and staying with that voice in you, reminding yourself every day that you are strong and you can do this. And whatever's going on in your life, you can get through this. And for me, it was the same thing, because I just did it on a world stage. I'm no different than anyone else out there. I just happen to have a TV in front of it.
Well, Cindy McCain, you've just been delightful and very generous with your time, and we're terribly grateful to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Ordinarily, I would pause and allow everyone to applaud you, but since we're virtual, we can't do that. They're doing it in spirit. I'm sorry we didn't get to meet in person. But, our thanks to Cindy McCain, author of Stronger, Courage, Hope, and Humor in My Life with John McCain. It's a really great read, I have to say. For being with us today, Cindy, we really appreciate it. And our generous supporters, the Travers Family Foundation and the Bernard Osher Foundation, we are deeply grateful for their continued support. We encourage you to pick up a copy of Cindy McCain's new book at your local bookstore or order it. It's well worth your time. Again, Mrs. McCain, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
If you'd like to watch more virtual programs or support the Commonwealth Club and all that we are all about, please visit commonwealthclub.org. My name is Dan Ashley from ABC 7 News in San Francisco and a Commonwealth Club board member. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate your being with us today, and I'll see you next time.